All right, as everybody knows out there, Clemson just did their spring game this past Saturday in Death Valley, South Carolina. And unfortunately, if you were not there in person, you didn't get an opportunity to see it outside of some much needed clips that were circling around the internet between Clemson fans, just kind of showing certain highlights and plays that were happening. There's not a lot out there, but there's enough to kind of get a gist of some of the bigger plays and some of the more exciting things that happened during the spring game. As everybody knows, this is kind of a weird time for spring games. Lots of schools out there are canceling their spring games or just doing a fan fest or whatever they're doing. Clemson goes ahead, still conducts their spring game, but it was untelevised, so a little bit different of a format in that way, that it wasn't on TV this time. You had to be in person. Also, not the traditional split the team in half, have head coaches, split the staff, the whole nine, draft style spring game that Clemson fans have grown accustomed to over the years. This was a, orange versus white, offense versus defense, good on good, ones versus ones, twos versus twos, threes versus threes, so on and so forth. So that was kind of the new format of the spring game this year. Jordan, what were your kind of thoughts on just kind of the new way Clemson went about the spring game, it not being on television and not really splitting up the team half and half like they usually do? Is this something that you think is going to stick, or what do you think about the format that we saw?
Yeah, I think largely was a success. The reviews obviously coming out were pretty positive for those that were at the game. It was a lot of fun. It was different. You got to see the good on good. It wasn't, they didn't try to split the teams evenly and do what they used to do. Obviously the not being able to watch it if you weren't at the game sucked, and hopefully there's some kind of compromise that they'll be able to come to maybe in future games. But the actual product itself, I thought was seemed to be really, really good. You got to see not just the starters play, but you got to see a lot of the young guys, a lot of the pieces, the newer pieces on the team. They got opportunities to shine. I thought you got to see the transfers, the backup quarterbacks who had some interesting performances that may have Clemson fans excited. You don't know. And obviously you got to see some of the deeper guys on the defensive depth chart make plays. It felt like it was good on good. And I didn't feel like the offense was overpowering on the day. And I thought the defense it felt like two good units playing against each other, and they both had plays, back and forth, and it turned out to be a pretty exciting affair.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard mostly positive reviews out of Clemson fans coming out of the spring game. I guess it took roughly 90 minutes, 93 minutes, somewhere in there for the entire from start to finish for the entire spring game to play out. So that's certainly a plus, I guess, for keeping fan retention in the stadium, not having people leave, at halftime or in the third quarter or something like that. So probably a little bit quicker of a pace in the stadium without the TV timeouts and stuff like that. They did kind of do the running clock on the second, third, and fourth quarter, outside of the 2-minute drill stuff. Then they went to a regular clock in those instances. But overall, it seemed like it was a hit as far as the format goes. Dabo Swinney was down there with a mic, entertaining the crowd like he normally does when it's televised, but it was just him down there kind of doing it. So nothing really changed from that standpoint. My only gripe or complaint is we got to figure out a way to get it back on TV, whether that's some sort of just broadcasting on the Clemson Plus app to keep it a little bit more exclusive if they want it that way. I'd be fine with that. I would just like an opportunity to view it on TV, even if it's just Clemson internal TV where they're broadcasting it on their own app instead of a big network where they got to take TV timeouts. I get that. I get it from that standpoint, but I think they could do something internal with their media to be able to get it to the Clemson fans that really wanted to watch it. I would not have any gripes about paying a subscription to watch the spring game. I would not care at all. So that'd be another way for them to make money. Let's talk a little bit about who jumped out, like who flashed in the spring game. And there were a lot of names being thrown out after the spring game. Dabo Swinney had an interview. Lots of players had interviews as well. But the biggest one was probably Tristan Smith. Had an amazing day, 72-yard touchdown catch, I think, that he took to the house after a missed tackle. I think he ended up with 5 catches for 130-plus yards, somewhere around there. So a really huge day for Tristan Smith, kind of a welcome to Clemson for him. And what an amazing, way to introduce yourself to the Clemson fan base, right? With a huge day like that. I know Eazy-E had a good day. Jeremiah Alexander, I think, led the defense in tackles during the game. Again, only a spring game, only a spring practice, so stats are what they are. But just a few guys that kind of got name dropped for having, pretty substantial days. Chris Denson, quarterback we got on late because of Blake Hebert decommitting and committing to Notre Dame, had himself a day, made himself look really good. CV looked the best he has in any spring game he's ever been involved with at Clemson. Certainly not a flawless day for him, but he looked really good. He looks good running, getting outside the pocket, using his legs as a weapon. And then, of course, Gideon Davison obviously made some pretty big plays, catching the ball out of the backfield. Not a whole lot of running room on the day, but definitely showed why Clemson was so high on him. What were your thoughts on just kind of the guys that popped off the screen, the guys that, had big days and just kind of won the day, I guess, for the spring game?
Yeah, you hit on a few of them. Tristan Smith, obviously, the more and more time that goes on, the more I feel like Clemson really got them one.
Yeah.
And when you think about what that means for this room in general, this wide receiver room in general, I mean, you can't be but excited because this isn't just one breakout performance. I mean, this is he's been making plays throughout spring practice, and so that should have Clemson fans really excited because we felt good about that starting group already, and you feel excited about the guys behind him. But when you add a guy like Tristan Smith with his 6'5" frame, his length, his catch radius, underrated after the catch ability as well, like that, you don't find many guys like that, and especially out of the FCS ranks. So Clemson really might have found themselves a diamond in the rough, so to speak. So excited to see how he continues to mature and develop because I think he's a guy that's going to make plays for Clemson in the near future. As far as the defense is concerned, I saw the safeties. There were a couple of guys that made big plays. Ronan Hannafin, we've been talking about him a little bit throughout this spring practice. I think he's going to be a factor for this defense this year. I really think he is. Joe Wilkinson, the true freshman, came in and played really, really well on the defensive line. Stephylan Green and Vic Burley both flashed at different points, which is really good to see. Darian Mayo had himself a really, really nice day, had his name called quite a few times. It's good to see some of the younger defensive linemen making plays because, we feel really good about this starting group, but you don't really know until they get out there and play. And so against that offense making plays, it's exciting to see. And then on the offensive line, Braden Jacobs, I think, was probably the biggest story going in, and he kind of struggled early in the scrimmage, but he really held his own going up against T.J. Parker and Will Helt. He is not a regular true freshman. like he could start for a lot of. I feel like I truly believe he would start for a lot of teams right now. He came in just ready to go, and he's only going to be get better throughout his time here. And I think you're in a good situation, if say Tristan Lay goes out with injury, and obviously he didn't scrimmage. He's been, obviously he had cleanup surgery early in the spring. So it's given Braden Jacobs a lot of time to shine, and he really showed himself on Saturday. Some other guys, David Azumame had a couple of big runs. I heard that, especially towards the end of that game, he really, really, broke off some big ones. Chris Denson, you already mentioned. He is a guy that I think Clemson. He's a guy that looks the part. Just throws a really pretty ball. He had that nice little wheel route to Gideon Davidson. That was one clip that was shown a good bit. That was a beautiful layered throw. He kind of, he beat the safety and kind of fit it right between the corner. It was a really, really beautiful throw, and you kind of see the arm talent. He still has to get more comfortable in the pocket because he definitely was looking to run a lot. That's just what he did in high school. He's a really, really great athlete, probably the most athletic quarterback on the roster. So, he's going to go and try and make plays with his legs. But when you see that the arm talent is already there and the accuracy, he showed a lot of poise. I think you saw a lot of talent on display. This looks like a team that I think could compete for a national championship this year. That just based off of this tiny little fraction, there's a lot of guys that can play that I feel like will be able to play for you this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the running back room a little bit, kind of focusing on that position group for a little bit, just because that's one of the big question marks that we had heading into spring. And obviously, we've heard really good things about Adam Randall. He didn't get a ton of playing time out there. It seems like he's kind of solidified himself as kind of the guy that's probably going to run out there first. And everybody else is just kind of seeing what we got as far as depth goes. But you mentioned Eazy-E. I mean, there was a couple clips there where he was really moving the pile, like driving his legs, not going down very easily, certainly not on first contact. A guy that put some moves on some people. You saw him kind of have some jump cuts in there and, scored a touchdown and he looked really good. So that's exciting to see a guy like that, a full year into the program. This is now his second spring at Clemson. You expect him to start making those steps, and it's nice to see it on the field and him actually producing from the running back position. So that's a really good thing there. Obviously, the injuries at running back are still leaving question marks. Jay Haynes has not been able to go all spring, obviously still recovering from that torn ACL late in the season. And then Jarvis Green, with the foot injury in the middle of spring practice. So he didn't really get to go, but obviously that opens up an opportunity for guys like Eazy-E and Gideon Davison and Hammerhead to kind of get in there and just, get a lot of reps. And it seems that the coaching staff likes where the running back room is right now. Again, that's still a question mark, I think, for a lot of Clemson fans post-spring practice. Jordan, I wanted to ask, what are some, we kind of hit some highlights on some, some big plays and some things that went well. What are your, you're sitting here, we're post-spring now. We've saw highlights of the spring game. What are still some big question marks that you have about this team, whether it's a particular position group or a couple position groups, or what's your kind of question marks exiting spring that you feel still need to be answered for this 2025 version of the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I really just, the secondary still has its work cut out for it, especially deeper, especially after the starters. We don't really have a whole lot of answers there. Backup corner obviously was certainly a position, a group that was heavily criticized by Dabo throughout spring.
Yeah.
And he praised them for, continually getting better, but we don't really have answers right now. We don't. And, with Tavoy Fegan entering the transfer portal, who we'll talk about later, you're there, that room and that picture is not really getting any clearer. So, Avion Terrell and Ashton Hampton going to be great corners, and they're going to do what they do. But you got to have more than just them. They can't play all those snaps. You got to have guys that are able to come in and play at a high level for you. Whether that's Brandon Strozer or Corian Gibson, who I thought Corian Gibson of the backup corners had probably the best day. He was the one that Tristan Smith caught that touchdown over, but he was stride for stride with him. He was in position. Tristan Smith is 6'5", and so it is what it is.
When that guy goes and high points the ball, there's not a whole lot you can do about it as a DB, other than maybe a PI. that's
really all you can do.
Defense on that one.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like we don't really have a whole lot of answers there. Miles Oliver is a guy that has been consistently out of in and out of the injury tent. So we haven't really seen much of him.
Yeah.
You don't really have a whole lot of answers.
Jaden Lucas, even Jaden Lucas, another experienced guy in the room, but he just can't stay healthy.
Exactly.
And he's still not healthy. He didn't participate in spring at all. So that's a veteran guy you got in the room, and a guy that you can trust when he's on the field. But the only problem with Jaden Lucas is you can't trust that he's going to be on the field. So. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You kind of got AV and you got Ashton, and that's a big question mark after that, right? Is Brandon Strozer going to continue to develop and step up? Is Corian Gibson going to be that guy that continues to develop and step up? I see people asking about Shelton Lewis. He was playing nickel early in spring, and then obviously, he got hurt kind of midway through spring, and he's been out ever since. So another guy that kind of is injury prone so far. So
it's unfortunate. But I think the safety room showed me a lot more than I was expecting. I mean, I had high expectations somewhat high expectations, but this safety room, they've got some thumpers, man. I already talked about Ronan Hannafin, but Ricardo Jones, and obviously I think you feel good about where you are, relatively. You think you're going to have a solid starting group with Khalil Barnes, and I would assume Kylan Griffin is probably that next guy up.
Yeah.
In the absence of RJ Mickens, but you have some youth that is flashed, but that is still a question mark. And Noah Dixon, a guy I was really high on coming out of high school. He's only a redshirt freshman, so it's like but I feel more comfortable with where the safety room is right now than I do corner, which is a little weird because that's not usually how it goes.
Right. Yeah.
But
definitely, it's especially like depth as well in the safety room. I mean, there's quite a few guys there that you feel like you could trust in meaningful situations.
Yeah, I mean they've just played more. So they just seem to be coming along faster. Like I feel good. I feel good about where Ronan Hannafin and Ricardo Jones are right now. I can't say that about the guys in the cornerback room right now. And so is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Another big question, I think, as we exit spring and go into the summer transformation phase for this Clemson team, and as we anticipate fall camp here in a couple months, is the punting situation at Clemson. Obviously, it's not good, and we've gone through a full spring now, and those guys have been quote unquote competitive, to quote Dabo. But even though they're competing with each other, none of them are good enough. I don't think a punt, from what I heard of the spring game, I don't think a punt reached further than 40 yards. And and only one really got close to that. There was a lot of shanks and things like that. They couldn't even punt it to, at the end when they were just having fun. They couldn't even punt then in a no pressure situation to a little kid. But that's a big question of concern, I think, for this football team, and maybe something that Clemson, possibly addresses in the portal. I don't know if Dabo will go out and get a punter, but I certainly think it's worth discussing or kind of observe, kind of thinking through the possibility of going to get another punter, because I mean, it just seems like these guys are not going to get it done. And I don't think you go into another season kind of having guys like we currently have that seems to be like it's going to be a repeat of the punting situation last year, which was pretty much a disaster.
Yeah, 100%. And the hope is that your offense is so good you're not punting too much.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what you're banking on right now. If you're not going to go get somebody in the portal, but you got to be able to flip the field, man. And it's been too long. Right? We took Will Spires for granted a little bit, but like that has not been a strong suit for Clemson for the past couple of years, and it's certainly hurt them especially in those years where the offense was struggling and you were punting a lot and you had to win the field position battle. And I think they were going to. I mean, I don't think this offense is going to score 50 points on everybody. I mean,
no,
this offense is going to be really good. I feel pretty confident in saying that, but that doesn't mean they're incapable of struggling or having an off game, and where you kind of have to win a little bit more, complimentary wise. You got to win in all three phases. Like that's going to be that's going to happen at some point or another, whether it's during the regular season or a conference championship or a theoretical playoff. There's going to be a time where the offense isn't putting you on your back and you're not having to flip the field at all. Like that just is unrealistic to expect. And I just don't want to come to a point where punting and being unable to flip the field is the reason why you lose a game when you had the option to go get somebody, that was capable. So, we'll see. We'll see. I don't, Dabo said they felt good where they were at, but that was before Tavoy Fegan entered the transfer portal. Although I feel like that was something that was probably coming.
Yeah, I think he knew that, just by his comments in the same interview, you kind of feel like he knew that Tavoy Fegan was going to be gone by just saying that, yeah, he wasn't here. So I think that was probably something that he already knew when he made that comment. But again, I certainly think punter is a position of concern, major concern, heading into this post-spring period and potentially something Clemson may need to address in the transfer portal. But, kind of turning the page to the offensive line, Jordan, we saw a lot of new faces out there in the spring game for the offensive line. You didn't have, Tristan Lay out there because of, him recovering from that cleanup surgery that he had. You didn't have quite a few guys out there. And you already mentioned the young guy that got a lot of head turning in Braden Jacobs, just kind of a massive individual, a massive human being, 6'7". Dabo mentioned it in his presser that, he's kind of the first guy off the bus. He's just, he looks the part. And looks like he played pretty well in the spring game, held his own against the likes of, TJ Moore TJ Parker and Khalil, Jaheim Lawson and, all those defensive ends that rotated through and that he had to block. Certainly wasn't perfect, but definitely you can see the immediate impact that this guy can have on this Clemson offensive line. And something that Dabo talked about in his presser was all of the young offensive line that kind of got a Matt Luke boot camp because we were missing so many of our starting offensive line that were out for, postseason surgeries, cleanups, those sorts of things, just addressing things that they knew they were going to have to address in the offseason, which they did. So a lot of these young guys got a lot of burn this spring. And, Dabo kind of alluded to it being a kind of a Matt Luke boot camp. So what were your thoughts on some of these young offensive linemen that we got to see and, maybe their future potential as they grow into bigger roles as Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, you have to feel good. I mean, and the track record and just the one season that Matt Luke has been here has been overwhelmingly positive, and you've seen the development. There just seems to be a lot more confidence in the depth than you've had in quite some time, and you feel good, despite having multiple guys go out, during the spring, that we're going to have guys ready to go if something were to happen. Where like you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to have to put out somebody who's just unplayable, but he's the best you have right now, which at times you had to do in previous years. Like I feel really, really good about where this offensive line is, just in terms of the quality of player, the caliber of player, the type of player that you have. I mean, you have guys that have positional versatility, but also they're big. They play big. They're not the undersized guys that you used to recruit. They're underrated or like a lot of these guys are they're highly recruited. Some of the best at their position. Like this is the most talented I think of a offensive line group as you've had in quite some time, and so. With that being said, and with Matt Luke and just the progression that you saw in year one, you have to feel good. And they certainly held their own against a really, really stout defensive front. And that's encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Very encouraging. I think overall it was a pretty good spring, switching over to the other side of the ball, the linebacker position, the addition of Alexander, Jeremiah Alexander was, I think, huge for this linebacker room. He stepped up in this spring game, and again, it's only a spring game, and stats don't really mean a whole lot. But again, this is a guy who, transitioned to the linebacker position back when he was at Alabama. Now he's at Clemson under a new defensive coordinator, and he looks to be kind of thriving in this Clemson system. Led the team in tackles at the spring game, and just seems to be like he's gaining some comfort, some level of comfort with Tom Allen and this defensive scheme. He seems to have really bonded with that group there, and looks to be a guy that can contribute this season. I know we got Sammy Brown, I know we got Wade Woodaz, and those two guys are absolutely going to run out there first. But we have been in need of some good quality depth at the linebacker position for a long time. And with some of the guys that you would expect to start to contribute out this spring, it was a good opportunity for Jeremiah Alexander and other guys to step in and get a lot of burn and develop. So what's your kind of thoughts on the linebacker room exiting spring?
Yeah. I mean, you have some questions, but I think they answered some of them. I feel good, better about where this group is fundamentally, tackling, that kind, from that perspective. I think Ben Boulware has certainly had an impact. I think they're playing with a lot more tenacity, a lot more aggressiveness, just a lot more like what we were used to getting out of Clemson linebackers. I was told that, Wade Wood, as you mentioned him, he's a guy that, he put on some weight last year, to play inside and be beefier, but it felt like he was a step slow because of it. And, when Wade Woodaz has been at his best during his career, I mean, obviously his true freshman year, he was playing a lot of safety, but he was slimmer. He was flying to the ball. He was playing downhill, but he could also, he was also covering, and he just looked a lot more sure of himself playing at a lower weight. So I've been told that he looks leaner than he did last year. which I think is good for this group. And if you have Wade Woodaz and Sammy Brown healthy and playing at a high level, and Jeremiah Alexander potentially being that guy that that really elevates the floor of this room, then things should look really, really improved, compared to last year. And because these guys are talented. Sammy Brown, obviously, we know how talented Sammy Brown is. Wade Woodaz absolutely has the NFL in his future. And I think if Jeremiah Alexander puts together a strong season, we could be talking about him in that conversation as well. So when you think about the younger guys, the guys that we haven't seen as much, the Kobe McLeods, the CJ Kuba Taylors, the D Craytons, if you kind of have a buffer now, and those guys can continue to get better as well. And, they've heard good things about them as well. So, this linebacker room, I feel a lot more comfortable now than I did certainly like 4 months ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, and you need guys to step up because Kobe McLeod's still out recovering from that ACL. Jamal Anderson out, Logan Anderson out. So much like the offensive line, some of those guys that have been in the program for a little bit were out this spring. So you get a lot of burn from them young guys, and it sounds like they were up for the challenge and they're developing. And it was interesting to hear Jamal Anderson talk about Ben Boulware as a linebacker coach and just how intense he can be. And Jamal Anderson was kind of like, yeah, he's a little over the top sometimes, but he's been where we've been, and he's gonna push those guys to the absolute limit because that's just who Ben Boulware is. Everybody knows who watched him play that he is going to be very intense, and he's going to hold those guys to a really high standard. So I'm excited to see how that linebacker room develops, but certainly I think we're in a much better place depth-wise than we were heading into spring, because that was certainly a huge question mark. Any other position groups you want to highlight before we kind of turn the page and get to our super chat here?
I think we hit on it. The defensive line already hit on. You mentioned some of the guys that flashed. We didn't get to see too much of the tight ends. That's probably the one thing that I was kind of disappointed. But they just didn't see the ball a whole lot. Adam Randall seemed to be on the pitch count. I think he got maybe the first couple of series, and then he was done.
Yeah, they weren't too interested in running him very much.
No. Which, hey, I get it. He's the first team guy. You need to have him healthy. You're going to need him this year. And so, that was kind of disappointing, but it is what it is. I understood, and certainly it was true for the other, big names on offense. You didn't see a ton of TJ Moore or Bryant Wesco or Antonio Williams. They were in non-contact jerseys.
Yeah.
And so, but you got to see some of the guys lower in the depth chart. Cole Turner had a couple of big plays on the day too. And so, didn't get to see a ton of Tyler Brown. So L on my prediction that he would be the MVP, but it was cool to see Tristan Smith kind of, take up that role.
I think Tyler Brown only had one catch.
Yeah. He didn't see too many targets. So, it is what it is.
I stand by the prediction that he is going to be a huge piece in this offense this year. I still stand by that. I'm not saying he's going to put up the Antonio Williams numbers of the 2024 season, but I expect a somewhat similar bounce back from him from a season just riddled with injuries. I think he's going to remind people in short order exactly who he is, and I think a lot of people have forgotten. And he's going to be a big piece of that wide receiver. You just think about that wide receiver room; it's going to be absolutely crazy. And if Tristan Smith is anything close to what he showed that he has the potential to be in that spring game, wow, we got some problems out there wide for the Tigers this year, and you can just rattle right down the list of the roster guys that are in that room, and there's not a ton of drop off. There's a lot of really talented wide receivers on this team.
Yeah.
With a little bit of luck and a little bit of health, they got a potential to be a really good group this coming year.
Yeah. I'm this close to saying what you probably can guess I'm thinking about this room in terms of where they stand.
Yeah,
you know,
I think we have
compared to the rest of the
certainly
country.
we've shifted back to the days of old of what you traditionally think of when you think of a Clemson wide receiver room. This room is it. I fully believe that this room is it. We got diversity of skill set, of body types. There's really no missing piece in this wide receiver room, I don't think.
I would have to agree.